Welcome to Things in the Ice. We've got a little bit of an interesting game for you here. This is a top 4 game from a local cEDH tournament held at Highlander Games, presented by Northstar cEDH. It's a great game, lots of action. Sadly, we lost the audio to this, so hopefully you're okay with me narrating. Enjoy the game, let's get to the action. John had the highest win percentage, so they're going first. But before that, we have a pre-game action by Nightlocker. They're going to start it off with the Gemstone Caverns exiling a volcanic island. John is on a EVELYN the Covetous Grixis list here. This is a World Grozier deck that also uses Thassa's Demo as win cons as well as Underworld Breach lines. They start the game out with a volcanic island as land for turn. They go ahead and tap that for a red and cast an Insolent Neonate, a 1/1 vampire with menace. Reads discard a card, sacrifice Insolent Neonate, draw a card. After the entire table has to read the card twice, John passes the turn to Zach. Zach is on DARGO THRASIOS. They get us started with the breeding pool, shocking it in, going to 38. They then cast a Chrome Mox, imprinting Invasion of Ikoria. Once that resolves, he taps for a green and a blue and casts THRASIOS, his commander. And if that wasn't enough, he then casts a Mox Amber. After a great turn 1, Zach passes. Nightlocker is up next. They are running Tymna Kraum. This is the classic blue farm list we all know and love or hate. They play a Mana Confluences land for turn and they pass. We then have Mike up next. They are on an ARAGORN food chain list. They're going to start with a command tower, tap that for a Noble Hierarch, and pass the turn. John gets turn 2 started out with a Badlands as land for turn. They then tap 2 to cast Ledger Shredder. After that, they go to combat. They swing 1 at Nightlocker, who takes it going down to 39. John then passes the turn. Zach goes ahead and untaps for turn, draws, and plays a Taiga. They then tap 4 for the one, the only, One Ring. Fantastic engine on this table. No one's really showing any other card draw. It's a pretty strong start for Zach. After a little table discussion on if this should be countered, the One Ring resolves, and Zach goes ahead and taps it to draw a card. They then pass the turn. In Zach's end step, Nightlocker casts a Enlightened Tutor. Off of the Enlightened Tutor, Nightlocker finds a Mana Crypt, puts that on top of his library, and goes to his turn. He draws the Mana Crypt, casts it, and goes ahead and casts a Dockside. That's Nightlocker's second spell for turn, so that triggers Ledger Shredder. John goes ahead and draws a card, and then discards a Miscast, putting a +1/+1 counter on the Ledger Shredder. After everyone passes on Dockside, it enters the battlefield and creates 3 treasure tokens. With those 3 treasures and exiling Simian Spirit Guide, Nightlocker casts Ad Nauseam. In response, John, exiling Mystic Remora, casts Force of Will, countering Ad Nauseam. With his plans foiled, Nightlocker passes the turn. Mike gets their turn started with a Mana Confluences land for turn. They then tap 2 to cast a Grand Abolisher. The table erupts in laughter, wondering did they just lose? Looking at Mike's board, they can see though he only has 1 mana to work with. They pass priority, and then Mike passes the turn on a value Grand Abolisher. John gets their turn started with an Imperial Seal. They remark because this card is foiled, they get 2 cards off of it. In response, Nightlocker casts Mental Misstep, paying 2 life. Imperial Seal is countered. Mike continues his turn with a Mana Vault triggering Ledger Shredder. In response to the Ledger Shredder trigger, Mike casts another Mental Misstep, countering John's Mana Vault. After 2 of his spells were countered this turn with Mental Misstep, John decides to pull out all the stops and activate Insolent Neonate by discarding a card, sacrificing Insolent Neonate, and drawing a card, hoping to find anything to get them back in this game. Hoping for a Mental Misstep from the Karmic Gods, John unfortunately passes on Mental Misstep, which counters his Mana Vault. Now we finally return to the Ledger Shredder trigger. He goes ahead and draws a card and discards a Blood Crypt. He then passes the turn. Zach goes to his turn, tapping the 1 ring, drawing 2, playing a land for turn, and then casting a Gamble. John asking the table here, does anyone have a mental misstep? With the Gamble resolving, Zach discards a Force of Will. Probably not the card he was looking for, but not a bad discard. Zach follows that up with an Arcane Signet, triggering Ledger Shredder. John goes ahead and connives, discards a City of Brass, and Zach goes ahead and passes the turn. With Nightlocker up next, they move to their untap, upkeep Mana Crypt trigger, lose the roll, take 3 damage, moves to their main phase. They tap 5 and cast Crom, Ludovic's Opus, their commander. They move to Crombat, swing 4 at John. They pass to Mike. Mike untaps and draws their card for turn. They play a Plateau as land for turn, and then they pass. John gets their turn started. They stress the need to the table to start putting pressure on Zach's life total. They decide to swing in with Ledger Shredder for 2. Zach takes it, going down to 35. John misses their land drop again, really wishes they had that mana vault, and passes the turn. Zach gets their turn started, untaps, loses 2 life to the 1 ring, draws their card, and goes ahead and taps the 1 ring, drawing 3 cards. In response, Mike casts a Intuition, targeting Nightlocker. His choices are Savine's Reclamation, Squee the Immortal, and Food Chain. After a little table talk, they decide Savine's Reclamation is their best bet, and they decide to give that one to Mike. With Intuition resolved, and 1 ring triggered back on the stack, Zach goes ahead and draws 3 cards. They crack their Misty Rainforest for a Volcanic Island. They then sacrifice their Chrome Mox, sacrifice an Arcane Signet, and ultimately the 1 ring, reducing Dargo's cost by 6 down to 1 red mana, and puts Dargo the Shipwrecker on the stack. The table passing priority on Dargo, Zach casts Neoform, sacrificing Dargo the Shipwrecker. That is Zach's second spell for turn, so John's Ledger Shredder connives, draws a card, and discards a Ad Nauseam. Since that was Zach's second spell, Nightlocker also has a Crom trigger. They draw and pass priority. Mike taps for 1 blue and casts an Offer You Can't Refuse, triggering Ledger Shredder and Crom since that is his second spell this turn. John draws and discards a 1 ring. He has unfortunately had to discard so many great cards you wonder what's in his hand. He then puts a +1/+1 counter on Ledger Shredder, and Nightlocker draws for Crom. Offer resolves, countering Neoform. Zach then plays a Talisman, followed up by a Mox Opal. They then pass the turn. Nightlocker goes to their turn on taps. They have a Mana Crypt trigger, odds are bad. It's good. They play a Polluted Delta as land for turn, cracking it, losing 1 life, going to 32. Finding an Underground Sea. They then cast Timna, move to combat, attack Mike with Crom, and Zach with Dockside, trigger Timna, draw 2 cards, and lose 2 life. After that, Nightlocker passes. Mike gets their turn started, they untap, draw, and cast a Lotus Petal. After that, they put a Savine's Reclamation on the stack, losing a life from Mana Confluence. Both Ledger Shredder and Crom trigger. This is Mike's second spell. Nightlocker draws a card, and John draws a card, and it's one of the only pieces of interaction that can help in this moment. It is a Otawara Soaring City. Unfortunately, Mike does not have the mana to cast it, and discards a Flooded Strand. Then Savine's resolves, putting a Food Chain on the battlefield. Mike then taps his Command Tower for a red and the Noble Hierarch for a white, sacrifices his Noble Hierarch to Food Chain for red mana, and casts Squee the Immortal. Table has no response. Mike then demonstrates a loop of sacrificing Squee to Food Chain to get infinite colored mana for creatures. He then casts Aragorn, and then continues to sacrifice Squee to Food Chain, recasting it, triggering ARAGORN's ability whenever a red spell is cast. He gets to deal 3 damage to target opponent. With no responses from the table, Mike wins and takes down the tournament, winning a Tundra. What a great game, and congratulations to Mike for taking down the tournament. Just goes to show that Food Chain does win games. Thanks again for watching Things in the Ice, and a special thanks to both Northstar, cEDH, and Highlander Games. We'll catch you again soon.